Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Superheroes, Movies, and Superhero Movies. Today we're going to talk about Thor, starring Chris Hemsworth, Natalie Portman, Tom Hiddleston, Anthony Hopkins, Stellan Skarsgård, and Idris Elba, and Rene Russo. Directed by Kenneth Branagh, and written by Ashley Edward Miller, Zach Stentz, and Don Payne, with a story by J. Michael Straczynski and Mark Protasevich. In case you haven't seen Thor, we're going to talk about the whole movie, so definitely spoiler alert. We're going to talk about pretty much every detail, so you'll definitely want to watch Thor first if you haven't seen it. Now with Thor, I've never been a huge Thor fan. In fact, I just don't think I ever really gave him a chance. But I used to go comic book shopping with my friend Steven, and he and I would always look at Thor and just go, nobody likes Thor. It was like kind of our little running joke. And then this movie came out, and I was like, Thor's actually kind of cool. And so, but my knowledge of Thor is going to be limited because I never read any comics and still haven't really read any Thor comics. So my knowledge of Thor comes from the movies.
Yeah, my the most that I knew about Thor before the movie, I knew he was a superhero. I had an extensive comic card collection, so I know I had several Thor cards, and I also remember having, I think I still might actually, the Thor action figure.
Oh, really?
But that was about as far as that went.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know, he had the hammer, and I remember Loki, because I remember having his card, and I was really just intrigued by the art that was done for him and how he looked, his like big horns and everything, because that was in the comics. Yeah.
I think I had seen Loki before because I when I saw the movie, I recognized his helmet with the big horns on it.
Right.
But if you had come up to me before I'd seen the movie and be like, you know who Loki is? I'd have been like, I have no idea. I mean, like, the only thing I really knew about Thor, or thought I knew, is that he was like a Norse god who had a hammer and he talked in like Old English, like said thy and thou and stuff, and I was like, I don't care. Like, I just never wanted to read.
I don't even think I knew
comic.
that he talked like that.
I don't even know if he did. I might have actually just assumed that he did.
Just looking at him, you're like, that guy talks like an idiot.
Right, exactly. Thor came out after Iron Man 2 and The Incredible Hulk, so it was kind of one step closer to bringing the Avengers on screen. They had teased Thor during the end credits of Iron Man 2. The post-credit sequence is the hammer in the middle of the New Mexico desert. And Agent Coulson saying, "Sir, we found it." So, it was going into it. I knew it was going to be part of this other big universe, and that he was going to be eventually part of the Avengers. If it hadn't been that way, if it had just been, I probably still would have seen it. I was going to say, if it had just been like, made by another studio, perhaps like a Fox movie or something like that, I don't know how interested I would have been in Thor. But because I knew it was part of this Avengers universe, and it was like you almost have to see it in order to see the next one, that kind of pushed me to the theater a little bit quicker. But it also, from the previews, it did look pretty good. I was worried that it was going to be a little too CGI heavy, and that it was going to look maybe a little cartoony, but Kenneth Branagh did a good job with it. I thought it was actually a good movie.
Yeah, I totally forgot that he directed it, and I remember watching it and thinking, because, he directs a lot of stuff. I can't remember precisely what they are.
He directs a lot of his credits are like Shakespeare adaptations that he's also in.
Right, he directed Hamlet.
He did and he's done Henry V and Much Ado About Nothing and Love, Labour's Lost and a few others, I'm sure. But most recently, he's directed the new Jack Ryan movie. It was supposed to come out around Christmas time, but it got pushed back to January, I think. But Chris Pine as Jack Ryan. Kenneth Branagh plays the villain, but he also directed it.
Nice. Yeah, I love his acting, and his directing is pretty impressive, too. I remember seeing trailers. Well, first I remember images being put out, and I remember everyone was like, that looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
I was on the fence about it, but I could see how it could have been a problem. But after seeing a trailer, I remember thinking, that looks pretty good. I was more excited about Thor than Captain America. In fact, Captain America, I think I was least excited about that year.
I was more excited about Captain America than Thor because I was always a Captain America fan. I'll save this for the Captain America episode, but I grew up watching this. I had this VHS tape of the Captain America origin. It was like some cartoon from like the 60s or something because it was like really not the greatest animation, but it was his origin story, and it was only like a 40-minute cassette tape, but I would watch it over and over again. I had Captain America action figures, and I had seen some of the old Captain America movies, so I was a fan. So I was actually excited about seeing,
interesting,
a well-done Captain America movie. I was a little on the fence about the director. Like, we had, Kenneth Branagh for Thor, I thought was a great choice. And then Joe Johnston for Captain America,
What else?
Joe Johnston, I think it's... Well, the first thing that always pops in my brain when I think of Joe Johnston is Jurassic Park 3, which is just... I'm not a huge fan of that. But he also did The Rocketeer. And The Rocketeer, I think, is... I used to love The Rocketeer as a kid.
We need to do a podcast on that.
Yeah, we should.
Because I don't even... I saw it just maybe a couple times. And it'd be interesting to go back and see if it held up.
Yeah, I haven't watched it in a while, so I hope it does, because I loved it so much when I was younger.
Right.
But he ended up doing it, Joe Johnston, I thought, did a good job with Captain America. But anyway, I was less excited about Thor than Captain America in terms of the Marvel movies.
I was not super excited about Captain America. I wanted to be. Well, like you said, we'll save that for Captain America. So anyway, Thor. Yeah, I was on the fence about, but then it came out and I didn't see it in theater. I don't remember how I saw it. I think I rented it from Netflix before they split it in two.
I did see it in the theater. I saw it like the day it came out. And it's one of those movies for me that I like more the more I watch it, I think. Because the first time I saw it, when I saw it in theaters, I was like, that was pretty good. It was okay. And then I didn't see it again until it came out on DVD. And I bought it on Blu-ray and I rewatched it. And I was like, wow, that's actually a pretty good movie. And I've seen it maybe a few times since then. And I think I enjoy it more every time I watch it.
This was my second time seeing it. I think I tried to start it a second time one time, but I don't remember getting all the way through it. Mm-hmm. But I remember the first time I saw it, I was just like... At first, and I was going to say, too, it had a lot of good talk going for it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
People were pretty impressed. Not like they were with Iron Man, per se.
Right.
But people were like, Thor was pretty good. Mm-hmm. And then when I actually saw it, I was like... Even with those good, even with the good word about it, I think it still went above what I was expecting.
Right. I still think out of the first 5 Phase 1 Marvel movies, Iron Man 1 I think is the best, but I think Thor is actually my number 2. Would be my second choice.
I think I'd probably... Well, yeah, I think I'd probably agree. You said... Did you mention the Avengers?
It was before, like, not counting the Avengers. So I'm counting Iron Man, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, and Captain America. Those 5 movies that came out before the Avengers.
Yeah.
Iron Man 1 is the best. Thor is the second best.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. So, this was the first time that there had ever really been a world, if I'm not mistaken, made in the Marvel movies that was an
Other than Earth?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And this was before Green Lantern, wasn't it? The same year?
It was 2011. Is that when Green Lantern came out? Yeah. So I think it was the same year.
I was more excited about Green Lantern.
Green Lantern. Yeah, sure.
The trailer...
I think I was too, probably.
The trailer was, it was good in my opinion, but there were some things about it. Thor, and then what was the other movie? Captain America was coming out. And it seems like there was one more movie that year that kind of held with them. Was it Transformers?
Might have been.
That
the
movie
third one, Transformers Dark Moon.
Yeah, we'll do a podcast on that too. Maybe. We were talking about Asgard. Asgard, I thought looked awesome. And I remember my coworker, mentioning how he wanted... he was hoping that when they did Superman, that they would almost be inspired by Asgard.
For Krypton?
For Krypton. And I can see why. I mean, it was gorgeous. They did really awesome with that.
They did a very good job with it. And up until Thor, I can't really think of a Kenneth Branagh movie that had as much CGI. And so he did, it might have been like kind of his... I wouldn't be surprised if it was his biggest budget movie to date. And his most digital effects heavy. And I think he did a good job with it, because Asgard does look good. And it wasn't until later that I found out that that bridge leading to the Bifrost is supposed to be a rainbow bridge.
Right.
Because I guess in the comics, I don't know if it's just looks like an actual rainbow or what. But they did a good job with kind of like the colors it almost seems like the light spectrum, like if you look at it a certain way, you see a certain color.
Oh, it's awesome.
And I thought they did a really good job with that, yeah.
Yeah, I love the bridge, the way they did that and designed it.
Somebody online mentioned that it kind of looks like the rainbow level from Mario Kart, which it kind of does. but
hey,
it looks cool.
That's a cool level, so...
Yeah, that's very true.
If that were the bridge, I wouldn't have a problem with it if I were in Asgard. We're introduced into the movie with something hitting the ground, and it turns out to be Thor. And then
I guess you could say
that's when they show you Asgard.
Sure.
And
as I say, you're introduced first to Jane Foster more.
Thor, well, they show the boys first, don't they?
Yeah, once you're in Asgard,
it's the boys.
Well, they actually before that they show you like the battle between the Frost Giants and Odin before they're even like kids.
Oh yeah, right. That's even before. Isn't that before the van, or does it open up with the van?
It opens up with the van. You see
Okay.
Jane Foster, and you see Eric Selvig, and you see Darcy, I think is her name.
Yeah.
And they hit Thor with their van, but you don't see that it's Thor yet, even though you pretty much know. And then that's when it cuts back to Asgard, and it kind of gives you the history of Asgard, and it gives you kind of the history of Odin and the feud between the Frost Giants and the Asgardians. And then it kind of jumps ahead a little bit, and you see Odin talking to his two sons, Thor and Loki, and Thor can't wait to, be king. He wants to be a warrior, and then it jumps ahead further, and it's the ceremony, which is supposed to be the crowning of the new king, right? It's supposed to be Thor's.
Yes.
Thor is assuming the throne,
right? And he shows his little personality there. He's flipping his.
Very arrogant.
His hammer.
Yes.
And who's the Jamie Alexander?
Plays Lady Sif.
Right. Sif, and you can see her. They did a very good job of giving the atmosphere, the characters in that scene life automatically.
One of the things I love about that scene is that he's wearing his helmet that he wears from the comics.
Yeah.
And it actually looks kind of cool. I actually was kind of hoping... It must be, in this world, more of a ceremonial helmet. But I actually kind of wish that he might wear it as to battle or something in one of the newer movies. Like, he didn't wear it in Avengers, and he didn't wear it in Thor 2. But I'd like to see that helmet come back.
Yeah, I would too. I didn't even think about that. You're right. He doesn't wear it. But in that scene, he calls him... Odin calls him Thor Odinson. Mm-hmm. Because he's Odin's son. And I didn't pick up on this until... I don't know if you caught it or not.
When he talks to Coulson?
Yes.
Yeah.
He calls him son of coal. I loved that.
Yeah.
That was amazing. Nice little throw in there.
There's a lot of humor in this movie, which is one of the things I like about the Thor movies, because there's a lot of humor in the second one, too.
Yeah.
They did a really good job with the jokes, which we can get to when we get there.
Sure. So another thing that I had a question about in this scene, which is where the Frost Giants are, sneaking in.
Sneaking in. Mm-hmm.
And there's probably not an answer. It's just a silly question. I was just curious. How did Odin know that they were down there? Like, what tipped him off? Because he was in the middle of... He was getting ready to crown Thor, and then all of a sudden he's like, Frost Giants.
Yeah, he it's like he senses them.
Yeah.
I don't know how he knows. I don't know. I mean, I thought about that too when I watched it last time, and my guess is that he just maybe he has kind of a
spider sense.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay.
He just kind of sensed that they were there. I don't know if that's like a superpower that he has or what, but
yeah, they didn't go in.
He sensed their presence, and he alerted. I don't know how he did this either, but he alerted the destroyer to come out and destroy them. I don't know if he like has a little button on his staff that lets the destroyer come out, or if he can just do it with his mind, or what. But he doesn't get off his throne.
I thought the destroyer was just being activated by a presence.
Oh, that could be. But the guards were in there, so maybe it was just an intruder alert type thing.
Right.
Oh,
I think
because
don't they pick it up? It's almost like Indiana Jones-esque, where you pick up the idol and it activates.
Oh, maybe you're right. Maybe they pick it up and then it gets. I assumed Odin called it, told it to go do it, but maybe you're right.
I'm thinking though, because when was he unleashed the other time?
Loki does it. Loki tells him to.
So does Loki summon him, or?
I thought so. I think Loki summons the destroyer.
Well, if he was summoning him though, then why would he have to go into the room? I think it was probably a presence thing. Anyway, that's minute stuff.
Well, I assumed he went into the room afterwards to check the damage and see if anything was stolen or not.
True.
So that leads into Thor wanting revenge, essentially, on the Frost Giants. The truce, he says, has been broken between the Frost Giants and the Asgardians, and he says they should go to Jotunheim, which is where the Frost Giants live, and put them in their place. And Odin says no, because he knows that it's not the Frost Giants necessarily who did it, it's just the act of a few kind of renegade, rogue Frost Giants.
Right.
But Thor doesn't listen. He decides to go anyway. And that is a cool action sequence, in my opinion. The battle on Jotunheim between the Frost Giants and Thor and his
it was.
fellow warriors. But there's also a great scene before that with Thor and Odin in the, I don't even know what the room is called, but the trophy room, essentially, where they keep that Frost Giant device, whatever you call it, the freeze.
Right. The freeze machine, the freeze box.
Right. The ice cube. But Loki's there. And Loki actually doesn't have any lines. But Tom Hiddleston in that scene is so good. It reminds me of... I've read a book by Michael Caine called Acting in Film. And he talked about how he was doing a play or something. And in this particular scene, he didn't have any lines and he wasn't doing anything. And the director kind of stopped the rehearsal and asked Michael Caine, what he was thinking during the scene or whatever. And he's like, nothing. He says, I think he says, what do you have to say in the scene? And Michael Caine says, I don't have anything to say. And the director's like, no, you have plenty of stuff to say. You're just not saying it. And so that kind of made, so Michael Caine was like, oh, interesting. Okay. And I feel like you can sense that from Tom Hiddleston in that scene because it's it's Thor and Odin arguing. And it cuts to Loki, and he's just kind of looking at his father, and he's looking at his brother.
It actually cuts to him a couple times, which when you see that happen, and the guy doesn't have any lines, it's
good. Yeah, and then you can really he does even though it's a wordless performance, you can really tell that I don't know something about it. It's just he did a great job with that scene.
Yeah, and there were a couple times in this movie. I remember that one did stick out to me, and there was a couple other where I think. Oh, I remember it was when he comes and meets Thor when he's been captured, and tells him, that Odin's dead and everything.
Right.
And then he walks away, and I was thinking, I was expecting a little bit of a X-Men grin, if you know what I'm talking about, like Mystique or something,
right?
And I was thinking, I hope he doesn't do that because I think it'd be better if he didn't, and he doesn't, and I was like, this guy knows what he's doing.
Right.
So, his presence is great. And it almost kind of comes out and jumps at you, unknowingly. You're not expecting it, and then he ends up just taking it.
Right. Watching this movie the second time, or having seen it once already and going back and rewatching it and knowing that Loki is kind of behind it all, it's interesting to see. He's the one that was responsible for the Frost Giants coming in the first place, and then he's responsible for. He kind of talks Thor into going to Jotunheim, even though he's like, no, that's not what Father said. But he really does kind of convince Thor to go. It's really interesting to watch and see like Loki be behind it all, pulling the strings when you watch it a second time.
Right. And honestly, it had been so long since I'd seen it, I couldn't remember. I knew he was, of course, pulling strings, but I couldn't remember what his plan was. And so I couldn't remember if Odin had died or not and stuff like that. And when that all came together, it's just like he is... Because Loki's the god of mischief.
Right.
In the lore. And also another thing that Loki was in, I was going to mention earlier, and in fact that might have been what I was trying to think of, was that Loki was the god in, it's a little side note thing, Loki was the god in The Mask.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was Loki.
Oh, that's funny.
So that's why The Mask is all mischievous and stuff, is because it's a Loki.
Right.
Obviously
that
not
totally makes
the
sense.
Marvel Loki, but...
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So...
That's cool. That's funny. We've kind of jumped into the movie without talking about what we think about Chris Hemsworth as Thor.
I was very impressed with his performance. And
I was too.
I didn't remember. I'm sure I was, but I didn't remember being impressed with it. And just watching him, I'm like, this guy's a good actor.
He is very good. And the more, Thor kind of put him, kind of pushed him into movie star status, and he's gotten a lot more roles now because of it, and everything I see him in, I think he's really good. He does kind of play here and there kind of the arrogant, cocky character, but he plays it pretty well, so I guess he can, he does okay with it. But I really like him as Thor. The one thing I wish about this first movie is I wish they hadn't dyed his facial hair and like his eyebrows. Like, you don't really notice it too much until that scene that you were talking about where Loki shows up after he's been captured.
Uh-huh.
It's like, I don't know if it's like a fluorescent type lighting or something, but the weird lighting in that scene like really makes it seem like his facial hair color is very unnatural.
Okay.
And I've noticed that in Avengers and in Thor 2, they don't do that as much. Like, he kind of has darker facial hair. Because I think Chris Hemsworth actually has brown hair. I don't think he's a blonde, or it might be kind of a dirty blonde or something.
I gotcha.
So they wanted him to be, they wanted him to look more like Thor of the comic book, so they tried to like dye all of his hair and his facial hair and everything in this movie. And now they're just kind of putting on a blonde wig, but let him kind of keep his darkish facial hair for this new movies. And I think it looks better.
Yeah, I can see that.
But that's a nitpicky note,
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, I talk about this too, so we bring it up in the podcast.
Right. That's what this podcast is for, right?
Right. Opinions. These aren't facts.
That's right. It's far from facts.
So, yeah, back to that battle scene. That was one that on, what's it called? Jotunheim? Jotunheim. That was one that should have been cheesy, in my opinion.
Right.
Like, you watch that scene and you're just waiting for some ugly thing to happen that just kind of throws off the movie, looks fake, makes it look cheesy. It doesn't happen. The whole CGI scene was very well put together, and it does not take you out of the movie.
And that's like the first scene where we see Thor twirling his hammer. And he does it, like, that whole battle scene is actually really cool.
Yeah.
You see, that's the first time you see him throw the hammer and it comes back to him.
Yeah.
And then he's twirling it and like hitting different frost giants with it and stuff. It's a really well done battle scene, I think.
Yeah, that was the point for me when he threw the hammer and it came back. I was like, this guy has major potential to be a cool superhero.
Right.
And he carried it through the movie.
Yeah, he did. By the time the Avengers came out, I was like, Thor's like my favorite character out of this group of characters. I really like Thor from the movies anyway. One of the things about the frost giants, the main frost giant, who's, I'm going to forget his name. I'll look it up. But the actor playing him is almost unrecognizable. It wasn't until later when I looked him up that I realized who it was. And it's this actor named Combe Fior, who or Combe Fior. I don't know how you say it exactly. But you would recognize his face if you saw him. And when I looked him up, I was like, that guy was in Thor? And he played that, frost giant leader so well.
Yeah.
I had no idea it was him. It was he does kind of this deeper voice for it and everything, and kind of a growl. King Laufey is what his name is.
Yeah.
In the movie. But I was really impressed with that actor because he really, it's a lot of it is makeup, of course, too, but voice wise and everything, like I would have never guessed that it was him.
I'm glad they do makeup stuff instead of completely CGIing a character, at least at this point in time, because I don't think they're quite there yet. And that was one of the things that I think was a big punch for me with the first Hobbit movie. Was that they went from the orcs, and technically I think they're supposed to be different, like, races. Like, there's orcs and goblins, and in the Hobbit they're goblins, I believe. But I thought they were orcs too. But anyway, that could explain why they did that, because I think there might be some people actually in makeup in the next one. To me, that the CGI can ruin it. I think good old makeup.
You're referring to like the Goblin King primarily?
No, all the other things were too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but yeah, the Goblin King was ridiculous. But even the goblins themselves, I would have preferred, actual individuals there. So I'm glad that they still did that with him. So,
not to get off topic, but the new Hobbit I think looks better than the first one, and I'm hoping it's really good.
I agree, but I also thought that the trailer for the first one looked awesome.
So we'll see.
This one looks like it could be a little serious, but I thought they were filmed around the same time.
I think they were back to back, just like the original Lord of the Rings.
Which concerns me, because if they're, he was probably almost done filming by the time any criticisms came out that he could have, taken note of. We'll see. It didn't look like it was going to be as humorous, and I think that was one of the big problems with The Hobbit, was they tried to be too funny and half-hearted with it.
Right.
Anyway, back to Thor.
Yes.
The other villain, so to speak, the Guardian, I loved the way he looked, and from what I've seen, it looks like they just copy and pasted him out of the comics.
The Guardian, who
not the Guardian, the Destroyer. I'm sorry.
Oh, the Destroyer. Yes. Okay.
And I love his design. He's cool, and the way that his helmet opens up, to do the beam is just awesome. You can even see the heat waves in it.
Right. And I love that, there's that one moment near the end where Sif jumps down on the Destroyer's back, and you think she's kind of taking care of it.
Oh, yeah.
And then his whole body could, reverse itself kind of and turn around.
It kind of reminded me of Terminator 2, like the liquid metal.
Yeah.
In the middle, after the fight, let's go back to the fight, and then Odin comes and saves him.
Right.
And I didn't understand why at first. They go into it, so I didn't have a reason to be worried, but I was afraid they weren't going to really go over it. I don't know why. But he banishes Thor, and then he throws the hammer in after him, and I'm like, why did you just throw the most powerful weapon with your banished son? Of course, they go into that later. Well, he gives the
phrase,
right?
Whosoever holds this hammer or whatever.
So he knows Thor won't be able to grab it until he's worthy to do it.
Right.
So then that's when it goes and shows him getting hit with Natalie Portman's character. What's her name?
Jane Foster.
Yeah. With the van.
So we're back in the beginning of the movie.
Right. And
he's been banished from Asgard, sent down to Earth. He's been stripped of his powers.
Yeah.
But he doesn't really believe it yet.
Oh, right.
Even when he's on Earth, he doesn't really believe it.
Right. And this is when some of the humor starts to kick in, which is some of my favorite stuff in this movie. And hopefully they didn't... Did they increase that in Thor 2 at all? Humor?
I feel like it's just as much, but it's not too much. You know what I mean?
Good. Okay. I was going to say,
Yeah.
sometimes when the humor's really good in the first one, they try to put a little bit more of it in, and it can take away and make it more cheesy in the sequel. So,
Right.
but yeah, they had the right amount of humor at the right time. My favorite one is, how dare you? What was it? How dare you? Something to Thor.
Threaten? Because she was talking about tasing.
Oh, you are no match for the mighty Thor, I think is what he says.
And then he gets tased.
No, wasn't that the...
Or is it when he's in the hospital?
The tranquilizer.
Yeah.
And then his face
hits the glass.
slides down the glass. It was great.
Yeah,
It was great.
I love that moment.
Yeah, he had a funny moment, too. I can't remember what it was with Natalie Portman before that. Kind of the same idea. And
yeah, it's because he's talking all crazy, at least to them, because he's yelling at Heimdall to open the Bifrost.
Right, they think
like,
he's
this
drunk.
guy's insane. And Darcy pulls out her taser, and he's like, "You dare threaten Thor with such a puny?" And then she zaps him, and he goes down.
That's right. That's right.
So that's pretty good. The only like comedy moment that I think it falls a little flat is the scene where they go back to the hospital to find him, because Jane Foster and Darcy and Dr. Selvig leave him at the hospital. They go back to their headquarters, if you will, and look at some of the pictures and data that they collected from that storm where Thor showed up. And they see Thor like in that like tornado cloud looking type funnel being banished to Earth. And so they go back to the hospital to try to find Thor, and he's gone. And it cuts to them sitting in their car, and she's like, "I lost my only, piece of evidence." And she starts backing up the car, and then Thor pops up, and she hits him again.
Right.
And that moment, it's funny, but it's almost a little too jokey. I think, especially
know
the way
what
he
you
gets
mean.
hit. Yeah,
I know what you mean, but it still made me laugh.
right.
Because I now it was because I wasn't expecting it. I can see how
Right.
when you know it's coming, you can be like, okay.
Yeah, I definitely laughed at it the first time I saw it in the theater, but it's the one joke that I think just doesn't quite work as well as the others.
Yeah. Yeah, the others are great. So that's when they take him to get coffee, right?
I believe so. Yes, it's shortly after that. Anyway, I think at first.
It probably goes back
First,
to
they take
Asgard.
him back to the headquarters. There's that obligatory shirtless scene of him. And she gives him a T-shirt.
Oh, right,
and he
right,
has
right,
the
right.
name tag on it that says Dr. Donald Blake, which is actually Thor's alter ego from the comics, which is something I found out later.
Huh.
I think back in the day, Thor had like
He lived on Earth.
secret identity. Yeah, and so he was Dr. Donald Blake, and then when he needed to be, because back a long time ago, if Thor didn't hold his hammer, like if he was away from his hammer for like 60 seconds or more, he lost his powers.
Forever?
I think just until he grabbed his hammer again.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
I think. So, he could have like a day
Yeah,
job. He
that
could
would
go,
make more sense, because then he'd have to sleep with his hammer like to his chest.
Right, exactly.
I don't want to lose my powers.
So I don't know when they changed it and just kept him as Thor all the time, but in the old comics he had like an alter ego, and he was Donald Blake, and then no one knew Donald Blake was Thor type of thing, So
I
it was
really
kind of a
like.
little nod, a little joke to the old.
I gotcha. So was he not an alien when he was first created? Was he actually supposed to be the Norse god?
I don't know, to be honest with you, I'm not sure.
Anyway, I really like how, I don't know when it was adopted, but how the characters are explained by being aliens.
Are they? I've never thought of them as aliens. I've always kind of thought of them as more like interdimensional beings. I mean, they're not on a different planet; they're on a different realm.
Are they not? I thought they were on a different planet.
It's just like another. It's in my opinion, it's just another dimension, and they have the Bifrost that allows them to go to these 9 different dimensions. But maybe it's a different galaxy if you want to consider that. I mean, I guess you could consider them aliens, but I know in the comics now, or even in the movies, he's considered a demigod, or not an actual god. But they don't ever call him an alien. But I don't know. I mean, that's an interesting way to look at it. I personally have never thought of him as an alien.
Okay.
But go ahead.
I thought they mentioned something about that, but maybe they don't. What were we talking about?
Oh, yeah. Because the Donald Blake name tag. And then that's when he says, this mortal form is growing weak. I need sustenance. And so they take him to the coffee shop. And there's another great comedy moment with the...
I got you. That's funny.
This drink, I like it. And that's actually when he finds out that his hammer is not too far away. Because these...
Oh, yeah, the guys.
Yeah, these guys come in and they say that there's like a satellite that fell from the sky, and they're trying to get it out of the ground, but nobody can, and then the government showed up.
And in fact, that was Stan Lee's cameo.
Right.
Was
them trying to pull it out of the ground.
Yeah. I still wish he hadn't had a line. I think it would have been cooler if he just turned around to see if it was... Anyway, you know.
That part made me laugh, though, in the theater, too, when he was like, did it work?
Mm-hmm. So they're going to go find the hammer, and Jane told... who is it, Eric?
Yeah, Eric Selvig.
Yeah. That she won't go with him, but she does.
Right.
This is where you see Hawkeye.
Right, and somebody mentioned in an article that I'd read that the Hawkeye scene was so obviously added in later. And I never thought of that when I was watching it the first time, but I tried to pay attention this time, and I was like, I guess they could have reshot this stuff later and added it in. But they would have had to do... Because Coulson talks to him, so they would have had to reshoot stuff with Coulson, too. But it is kind of... I was noticing this time around that Hawkeye does get lifted up in that little carriage, or whatever you want to call it, so he can get a bird's eye view. But Thor is inside those tunnels. And so maybe he can see shapes, but Hawkeye doesn't really have necessarily the best shot of him until the fight gets out. He's almost to the hammer, and Thor gets knocked outside by that huge guard. And there's that, the end of the fight scene.
Well, maybe he was just watching for the hammer section.
The hammer. Maybe he could see the hammer from where he was.
Right.
But it's interesting. It's almost kind of less cool to realize that maybe they added in that Hawkeye scene after the movie was kind of finished.
Yeah, I mean, I was okay with the Hawkeye scene.
It's still a fun cameo, though. Yeah.
So yeah, that was a moment for me. I remember the first time I saw it was when he grabs the hammer, and you're just expecting this epic music blasting, him pulling the hammer out of
lightning coming down and everything,
and he can't get it out. Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, don't they just, almost just play? They take out the sound, and it's just music.
You could be right. I know he screams, but I don't know if that happens.
Right, but I think it might have been slow motion, and they dulled the sound down and did the music. Or it might have been quiet, I can't remember. But with the rain and everything, I remember feeling kind of sorry for him. Mm-hmm. Because if you think about it, he's lost, and this is the one thing he's familiar with.
Right.
And he's still separated from it.
It's his only connection, really, to his home.
Yeah.
And he can't get it.
But
it is sad, and that's why he's pretty much depressed in the next scene while he's being, interrogated by Coulson.
Right. But I was going to say, up to this point in the movie, the first time I had seen it, I kind of viewed Thor as a jerk almost.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So,
that's his character arc. He's this arrogant, like you said, jerk who's selfish and, what's the word I'm looking for? He's too quick to jump into action. He doesn't take the time to think. And so that's actually the note that I wrote. I didn't write very many notes, but the one note I wrote was that Thor actually kind of has a similar character arc as Iron Man from the first movie. They're both kind of these arrogant, selfish characters who have to learn to put others before them and to become more selfless and humbled.
Yeah. I think Thor takes it a little further than Iron Man does.
Yes, Iron Man actually remains arrogant, but at least he kind of learns that he should help people rather than...
He might not be necessarily doing it for other people than just it's the right thing to do. And I mean, he's a good guy, but what I'm getting at is Thor really transforms in this movie. The Thor in the end, it's almost like someone whacked him in the head and he forgot who he was.
Right.
Which is cool because Chris Hemsworth does a great job of making both of those characters believable, and they're almost totally different personalities. So when I see Thor in the end, like towards the end of the movie, the second half of the movie, being such a caring guy, it's almost
willing to give up his own life for the people.
Yeah, I'm almost like, man, the guy that you were almost makes you unrecognizable right now.
Right.
Which was cool.
Yeah, definitely. It's actually one of the things I thought about just in talking with you now is that it's actually kind of a risky move to have a Thor movie where he's doesn't have powers and really isn't quote unquote Thor for most of the movie. Mm-hmm. He gets banished. He doesn't have his hammer. He doesn't have powers. Mm-hmm. He spends a lot of time with Jane. He tries to get the hammer. Then he goes out drinking with Dr. Selvig, which is a hilarious scene as well. And it isn't until pretty much the very end that he finally gets the hammer back and regains his powers, and that's when he has to go and confront Loki.
Which is something else that I have to note about this movie. But first I want to ask, since we're technically kind of still on the hammer in the rock before he could get it out. Of course you noticed when they pulled him away, the symbol was on the hammer.
Yeah, it kind of showed up when Odin was saying the oath, I guess, if you will, to Mjolnir.
Right, but it still didn't work. He couldn't pull it out. So, was he like almost able to pull it out? Was he almost worthy? I don't see...
Referring to when? Oh, when he's actually struggling to do it?
Yeah.
And you see the little symbol?
The symbol comes up and then it slowly fades away.
Oh, I don't know.
It was
maybe
there.
It recognized Thor, but realized that he wasn't. He was no longer worthy or something.
It's like owner.
Right. Hey, buddy. Oh no.
Your father's going to be really mad at me if I come out of here right now.
Right. You saying that, I actually don't remember seeing the symbol, so I actually never picked up on that. But that's an interesting thought. It's an interesting note.
Yeah. But we were talking about how the movie was not really... it wasn't Thor for a lot of the movie. And the conversation we had earlier came up in my mind about how you were talking about Spider-Man 1. And how it wasn't a threat of the world. It was a very simple, focused movie. That's what this movie was.
Yeah.
The world was not even a factor in this. It was
Loki.
It was
Loki,
Asgard.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Loki was more interested in getting the throne of Asgard than he was. He didn't care about Earth at all.
Right.
Earth was beneath him.
Yeah. So to be able to connect your audience with that, and they were on Earth so much, which was really interesting. It just the way they were able to make this movie pace and be simple, like it was, especially for the first movie. They just nailed it.
Simple for a superhero movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's a simple story. Guy's trying to get his hammer. His brother doesn't want him to have it. It's really what it is. And just everything that happens in the movie, it's amazing how well they pulled it off. And to show that simple things like that can be good. You know, simple stories can be interesting.
Right, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to have... I mean, eventually, like I said, when we were talking about that with Spider-Man, when you have the Avengers come together, you have to have a threat big enough, obviously, to have 5 or 6 or 7 superheroes fighting it off. But you don't have to have every single superhero having to save the world every time. I mean, I guess it really just depends on the character, you know? It kind of depends on how powerful your character is and, like...
Sure.
You know...
I want there to be, you know, world in peril kind of stories
sometimes,
too.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, I don't want to see those gone. That's classic.
But you don't want to see it all the time.
Exactly. It seems like here lately that, you know, that's the common thing. And I can't think of too many times that, you know, if there's a good movie and that's, you know, like Man of Steel, for instance, that's a world in peril. And it's a great story, in my opinion. So,
Mm-hmm.
but
right, and Superman is like I said, one of those characters that's like so powerful. The threat has to be kind of. I mean, well, that's the other thing about Superman too. Like Superman, he doesn't just save the world. He saves, he cares about the little guy too. But that would also make kind of a boring movie if he doesn't. If the whole movie is him just getting kittens out of trees and things like that. So, like, it has to be, for a movie, it has to be a big enough story, something that he is going to push him to his limit,
Yeah. Yeah. But then you've got pointing out some of the, the common world taking over, Transformers, Lord of the Rings. That's about it. Never mind.
Never mind.
We need more Earth destruction movies. I think we could talk now about when Loki went back to Jotunheim.
Mm-hmm.
And...
Well, he discovers... We've skipped like kind of an important little...
Let's talk about it.
Plot point, I guess, which is during the first battle when Thor goes to confront the Frost Giants. He's there with Lady Sif and the Warriors 3, and... I can't remember the character's name, but one of them gets touched by a frost giant, and it freezes his arm, and it hurts him. And he yells out, "Don't let him touch you." And right after he yells that out, Loki gets touched by a frost giant, and it really has no effect on him. It turns his skin blue, but it doesn't hurt him. And so he finds out that he's actually...
Oh, yeah, of course.
A frost giant. He's actually, I think he's King Laufey's son.
Yeah. I believe you're right.
And Odin found him during the original battle as a baby and decided to raise him as his own. And Loki was not thrilled to find that out.
I'm not mistaken. He did not reveal this to Laufey, did he?
I don't believe he did.
And I think the reason for that is if he had, Laufey would have been like, "Oh, well, we're going to take over Asgard, but I'm going to be the king." So
right.
Yeah.
And it's kind of what he kind of suggests to Laufey. Again, he's still pulling strings. He has his own agenda. But he goes to Laufey and tells him, "I will lead you into Asgard, and you can kill Odin." And you, as a viewer, the first time you're watching it, you believe Loki because he is upset with his father for lying to him about his origin or whatever. He grew up thinking he was the son of Odin as well, but he's not.
Right. I thought he did a good job, though, because you're right, he was upset, but he also did, like, when Odin falls over, he seems really concerned for Odin.
Mm-hmm.
And then
absolutely.
The scene with his mom when they're sitting over him. So that actually took me off guard, because I was, like, even the second time I couldn't remember, and I was like, oh, he actually wants to kill him.
Mm-hmm. So Loki goes to Jotunheim.
I think he says you can kill Odin, but I thought he said something about him sitting on the throne. And basically... Yeah, no, that's what it was. Laufey didn't want Asgard. He promised him that his world would be restored to its former glory, is what former glory.
He could have
is what it was.
He could have that ice cube back and everything.
Right. So I think
they need that to restore their world to its former glory.
So he pulls a quick one on them too, which was pretty awesome. They come in to slaughter Odin, and he slaughters Laufey.
Mm-hmm.
So he has a lot of aces up his sleeve, especially the first time watching it.
And Loki, the reason Loki does that is, no one on Asgard knows that that Loki has gone to talk to the Frost Giants. And so he looks like a hero to the Asgardians. And it also allows Loki to seek vengeance on the Frost Giants, which he plans on doing by opening the Bifrost permanently to Jotunheim, which will the power of the Bifrost will just continue to build and build until it destroys that realm.
Mm-hmm. And that was one of the notes that I wrote down, was at the end of the movie, you actually see he was not going to kill Odin. So I take back what I said about those scenes.
Laufey was going to kill him, but Loki knew that he was always going to kill Laufey before he could kill Odin.
So I think the scene, where Odin falls over and everything, and I said he was acting genuine. he probably actually was. Because
I think he was.
Because at the end of the movie, that dialogue, leads you to think it is.
We're pretty much at the end.
Are we?
I mean, this stuff is kind of going on at the same time. Loki has sent the destroyer to New Mexico, and Thor has essentially given up. He's willing to give up his life for his friends and his human friends, and the destroyer almost kills him. I don't think he quite dies, but he is beat pretty badly. And that's when we see the hammer finally come out, and that's a pretty great moment where I love the shot where like you see the hammer flying through the air, and then very quickly his arm comes up and catches it, and then you see the lightning bolt and everything. It's that epic moment that you were talking about, like how you expected to see it in the previous scene. Like now we're seeing it in this moment.
Yeah,
the fight with the destroyer is pretty sweet and pretty short. Once he gets the hammer, he throws the hammer at the destroyer. It knocks it over a little bit, and then he kind of Thor starts twirling his hammer and kind of creates kind of a tornado. And the destroyer kind of gets swept up in the wind, and then I think he uses lightning, if I'm not mistaken. But he throws a death blow to the destroyer, and it destroys it.
Yeah.
And so then he needs to get back to Asgard because he had been told by Loki that Odin was dead. But then when Lady Sif and the Warriors 3 showed up, they informed him that Odin was not dead. He was just in the Odin sleep. And so he needs to get back to Asgard so that he can confront Loki.
Yeah. Seems like I remember a very strong facial feature moment there of betrayal, if I'm not mistaken.
The Destroyer also, there's a scene, this is, I guess, Asgardian technology. We were talking about how he knows... we were talking about how Odin knows that the Frost Giants were in the trophy room. At the scene where Thor essentially, is willing to give up his life for his friends, he's talking to the Destroyer, but it shows Loki, and Loki can listen, and Loki can hear what Thor is saying on the throne in Asgard. So I wonder if, the Destroyer has some sort of kind of communication built into it, to where if you talk to the Destroyer, whoever can kind of control the Destroyer, the king, can hear it. So I wonder if the Destroyer actually alerted Odin that somebody was in the trophy room.
It's possible.
If there's some sort of weird psychic connection to it. But anyway, he goes back to Asgard.
Right. And fights Loki.
Fights with Loki. The end. No, he gets in a fight with Loki, but really the ultimate thing that is happening is that Loki has started the Bifrost. He's opened the Bifrost to Jotunheim.
Right.
And refuses to turn it off, and which will destroy Jotunheim. And Thor just can't let it happen, and so he decides the only way he can defeat Loki is to destroy the Rainbow Bridge, which would destroy the Bifrost.
Right.
Which would save Jotunheim.
And of course,
but he also knows that if he does that, the Bifrost is broken and he can't travel to any other realms. So he won't be able to go back to Earth to see Jane,
who
he promised he would come back.
Who he has fallen quite in love with.
Right.
And that's a believable romance too. They did a really good job there. I was sad for him when you knew that he was thinking he couldn't see her again. But the brothers, Thor and Loki, they also, before that happens, they exchange their emotions and everything about, Loki says, "Father always loved you more than me," kind of thing. So that, and they did that well. Really made you feel the brother connection there. But then Odin comes and saves them from... How did he wake up?
If I remember correctly, he wakes up while Thor is destroying the Rainbow Bridge. I feel like right when on the first hammer strike, it shows Odin's eyes opening.
That sounds familiar.
And so he destroys the bridge, and I watched it last week, so I'm having a little bit of a hard time remembering. But both brothers end up falling off the bridge, which it looks like they would just float off into some galaxy or something, or into space. It's kind of what it looks like. Almost.
Well, there's the hole to Jotunheim, But
wouldn't that be closed once the Bifrost fell apart?
But it was still sucking him in, because that's where Loki goes to.
He ends up on Jotunheim.
That was a question I wrote, because that black hole thing was where the portal to Jotunheim was.
Right. Okay. So I don't know. I mean, I never knew where Loki went, because he just kind of shows up in the Avengers. And
right, I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember if there was a Jotunheim scene with him or not.
There's not. I can't remember the first. Well, the first scene with Loki is the very first scene in the movie where he just shows up. There's like a portal that opens up, but it shows him talking to. I don't remember the character's name, but it's that alien guy who is. Spoiler for the Avengers, if anybody's not seen the Avengers, skip ahead like 15 seconds. But he's like the right-hand man to Thanos. Uh-huh. You find out at the end. So I don't know how Loki got into touch with them, or if he was somehow transported to their side of the universe or galaxy or what. It doesn't really explain it. And then in the end credit scene at Thor, too, he shows up and he's like already kind of taking control of Eric Selvig. It's a question. I'm not really sure exactly what happened to Loki at the end.
Yeah.
But they were acting as if he died. Like, Thor was very upset. Odin was upset.
Right. But before he lets go of Thor's arm, which he does, he kind of turns his back on both of them by letting go. But he was telling Odin, his dad, that he was trying to please him by destroying Jotunheim. And I never really understood why Loki thought that would please Odin. Especially when Odin was
against
Thor. Yeah, he was so
going
against it, and then he
in the
banished Thor. So I never... Did you ever think...
I know, I never... I haven't really given it much thought, but maybe it's just kind of him mistakenly thinking that if he destroys Jotunheim... I don't know. That's a good question. He's obviously, I mean, he's a villain, so it's considered maybe he's not quite right in the head. I don't know.
Yeah. That is true. I'm looking at it like Loki is sane. So yeah, that's all the stuff I have down. I wrote that I think he got teleported to Jotunheim.
Right. Which is possible, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Then the movie ends with Thor talking to Heimdall, played by Idris Elba, and wondering how Jane is doing, and Heimdall tells him, she's looking for you.
Yeah.
She searches for you or something.
Yeah.
And then it goes into the credits, and it's a solid movie. Like, I really like Thor. Like, his character arc, the Kenneth Branagh's direction, the production design of Asgard, even though most of it is probably CGI. Like, it's all really, really well done.
Yep. Very professional. It took me off guard how well it was, how good it was. The end credits, what's up with Loki? He says, well, I guess it's worth a look. And then Selvig says the same thing.
I was assuming that he was sort of kind of maybe taking control of Selvig. Yeah. I don't really get it either. Thor looks very beat up in that shot. Like, he looks like he's gone through a lot. I feel like his face is kind of cut up maybe, or bruised, or darkened, or, like he's got, like, marks on his face. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm just remembering it incorrectly, but he's looked like he's seen better days.
He probably went to a bar. Had a few.
Probably. Got hammered. Got into a bar fight.
And then when he finally came to, he goes and finds Selvig. Anyway.
But that also, I guess... I mean, really, some of these end credit or post-credit scenes, I think, sometimes are just strictly to get the audience excited about an upcoming movie, and they might not necessarily be connected. That one, in that case, Eric Selvig does end up helping Nick Fury. Like in the beginning of the Avengers, he's working with the Tesseract and trying to do research on it.
But he wasn't being controlled by Loki?
Not at that time, no.
So Loki's just like, all right, that's all I wanted to say.
But maybe Loki takes that information and gives it to those beings who want it.
Of course. Well, all in all, Thor was a great movie.
Excellent movie.
Yeah.
My rating, I would give it an A.
An A. I give it 4 out of 5 stars.
All right. Sounds pretty good. We'd like to know what you think about the movie. Let us know. You can comment on cinemaheroes.com, or you can email us, justin@cinemaheroes.com or john@cinemaheroes.com. As always, you can go to our Facebooks, SM and SM Pod, or I guess it's facebook.com/SM and SM Podcast. You can comment on there, or you can throw us a line on Twitter @CinemaHeroes. As always, feel free to check out cinemaheroes.com to click on the Amazon banner if you're going to make any Amazon purchases. And yeah, I think that about wraps it up. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm John Pelzel.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for downloading.